And so good morning, everyone. It's so nice to have you all here with us this morning at Temple Buddhist Center. As you know, tomorrow is Veterans Day, and this topic of serving in the military or bearing arms or even war comes up often in my discussions with other practitioners. And so it is certainly fertile ground for inquiry. So before I continue with the Dharma Talk today, which is entitled In Service to Awakening, I do want to take a moment of gratitude and to thank all of our Sangha members and anyone, anywhere who has served their country, their communities in the military, their dedication and their bravery, for all the individuals who have served military both here and abroad. So let's take a moment and just feel gratitude in our hearts for all the things that we have that we so often owe to the people who have protected these things for us. And so our talk today consists of basically two parts. I wanted to touch on this idea of service in the military and what the relationship to Buddhism is. And then the second part of the Dharma Talk is about service as a path to awakening. So first, can we be mindful of our own beliefs, thoughts, emotions, prejudice, when we mention the idea of military or soldiers and Buddhism and war Buddhism? Can we be aware of our own thoughts and beliefs that arise around that? Oftentimes in discussion with people, they speak to me and their discussion often builds this wall or this idea of separation between Buddhism and the military or war of any kind, that it's a completely and totally pacifist practice. But the truth is, Buddhism has a very long history and at times been very deeply intertwined with the military. And so I want to touch on that just for a moment. So for example, consider these examples of Buddhism and the military. The warrior emperor Ashoka, who was the first Buddhist monarch, was widely responsible for spreading Buddhism across Asia. And that same monarch and some of the subsequent emperors and monarchs who also adopted Buddhism established and developed military rules of conduct with ethical guidelines limiting the use of force that resonates with current international doctrines and guidelines such as the Geneva Convention. So Buddhism actually, in many, many ways, informed the practices of the military, some of which are still held today. Now, the monastic rules of the Vinaya prohibited monks from direct military service. Yet, insofar as war is one of the greatest causes of human suffering, it was regarded as a legitimate concern by the Buddha. He demonstrated numerous times that he was willing to address war as a political and social reality. He states this: struggle must exist, for all life is a struggle of some kind. But make certain that you do not struggle in the interest of self against truth and justice. He who struggles out of self-interest to make himself great or powerful or rich or famous will have no reward. But he who struggles for peace and truth will have great reward. Even in defeat, they will be deemed victorious. So The invitation or the teaching here is about intention. It's about our intention in the activities that we engage in. It's about becoming mindful where our actions are coming from. When you reach out to touch someone on the shoulder, what is the deeper intention there? When you speak to someone, what is your intention? Becoming mindful of that. Now, this does not mean that we do not work towards peace, of course, but it's not so much what we do, it is the quality of the doing. Which is more skillful? The soldier who takes up arms to protect community, or the peace activist who carries hatred for the soldier or the conflict? Carrying hatred in our hearts, even in the name of peace and truth and justice, only puts more hatred into the world. But to take up arms to protect a community, and doing so out of love and compassion, even for the quote-unquote enemy, is an act of metta, or loving kindness. I'm often reminded of the Dalai Lama when he was asked at the end of a long interview, okay, what about mosquitoes? And the Dalai Lama said, well, the first time he lands, the second time he lands, the third time he lands. So creation and destruction are always at play. And sometimes, even when you walk to your car, you will be an agent of destruction. But it's about intention. What is in your heart? What is the intention? We have an example of that right here in our very own Sangha. One of our members was concerned about being deployed to the Mexican border recently. And as we talked, we further discovered together that if it is to be, then what better place to be a voice of compassion, to be in a position where you could actually help relieve suffering. So she went from fear to in service to awakening. This is what is known as samadhi. It is the first step on the Noble Eightfold Path, which is known as wise view, or it's sometimes translated as wise understanding. Vision of the nature of reality. And remember, as the Buddha said, he recognized war as a political and a social reality. He didn't discard it, he didn't run from it, he didn't turn away from it. So when we cultivate present moment awareness, and instead of turning away, numbing out, we accept, we recognize, we can then cultivate wise view, wise understanding, and have a vision of reality, and also the path to transformation. And as I stated earlier, the Buddha considered war and the need for a military this social and political reality. So I want you to consider this article. It's a small excerpt from an article called Apology of a Buddhist Soldier by Lawrence Rockwood. In general, peace movements and peace initiatives too often center on the prevention of war rather than focusing on the suffering of those already caught in the hell of war. War is to peace as sickness is to health. Just as it would be unfeeling for healthcare professionals to work only on the prevention of illness and not its treatment, I suggest that dealing only with the prevention of war and not the conduct of war is an inadequate approach to the suffering of war. And so therefore, as we approach Veterans Day tomorrow, we take a moment and hold in our hearts all those people that hold in their hearts this intention to bring into the military, to bring into difficult zones and areas of conflict, compassion, understanding, and a desire to relieve suffering. Thich Nhat Hanh says, "You cannot just separate people and say some are violent and some are not. That is why people with love, compassion, and nonviolence should be everywhere, even in the Pentagon, in order to encourage nonviolent attitude with those that we think are our enemies." The Buddha counseled his followers to accept the world as it is, to love the world as it is, while at the same time using every means at our disposal to relieve the suffering of others. George Bernard Shaw said that the worst sin towards our fellow creatures is not to hate them, but it is to be indifferent to them. That is the essence of inhumanity. And those words apply to not only those who hate war, but those who fight them, and those who do both. And so now I want to take a moment to talk about service as a path to awakening. Many soldiers have dedicated their life to being of service to our country and our communities and our values. This is an example for us all. No matter what you do or are doing, let it be in service to awakening. A spirit of service to one another and to ourselves grows out of moments of mindfulness, out of our meditation practice, and out of blessings. If we pay attention to the cycle of our breath and our beating heart, there is a tiny and necessary pause between each beat, between each breath. Spiritual maturity also requires such periods of stillness. When we step out of commercial time and into that which is timeless by taking the one seat. When we sit, we do not sit to make life better for ourselves, to relieve our own suffering. We sit in tremendous dignity and with a noble sense of service to humanity. We sit to relieve the suffering of all mankind, of all sentient beings. It's not, I have to get my 20-minute meditation in. It is an incredibly dignified, noble, and auspicious event to take a moment and cultivate presence, to cultivate beingness, to cultivate peace, love, compassion, and equanimity within your heart. As Jack Kornfield says, to stop the war inside is how we will stop the wars outside. Any fear, anger, hatred, or greed that we bring into any moment or experience is only adding more of that into the world. And so we cultivate peace. We cultivate joy, sympathetic joy. A win for one is a win for all. By taking the one seat. By becoming mindful in every action, in each thing that we do. Become the sanctuary that you seek. This can begin with a daily period of meditation or prayer. Sometimes it may require creating regular periods of silence, perhaps where we work. It can mean representing or releasing our lifestyle, moving forward voluntary simplicity, spending time in nature, attending periodic retreats. It might mean turning off CNN and turning on Mozart. In times of difficulty or conflict, it may mean taking a breath, settling the heart, listening silently to our deepest intention. And in these moments, we remember our heart's task here on earth to open, to see the whole planet and everything on it as sacred. And so I want to close with this little quote by Rabindranath Tagore. I slept and I dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and saw that life was service. I acted, and behold, service was joy.